Okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone from Accra, Ghana. My name is Isaac Ojodenabo, and you're welcome to the online knowledge series for entrepreneurs in the box. Today, we're partnering with our friends at Centenary Attorneys to bring you this event. Of course, this is Boss Play Ventures. If this is your first time, you're welcome. This is going to be an exciting interaction, having a very important conversation that is critical for startups and SME success. If you don't know, this knowledge series called In the Box is an initiative of Box Play Ventures, an Accra-based startup and SME consultant and venture builder. What Box Play does is that it is passionate about supporting entrepreneurs and bringing them the entrepreneurial and innovation ecosystem in Ghana and beyond. Um, this In the Box series is a live linking event where we exchange insights and contextual knowledge that is relevant for African entrepreneurial success and the venture building ecosystem based on the real needs of entrepreneurs, ecosystem enablers, and investors that we encounter regularly in the course of work. So today we're going to have one of those exciting conversations, particularly around compliance and governance for startups. This is the third episode for our In the Box series. And today, the conversation is how to get governance and compliance right as a startup or SME. It is very crucial to get compliance and governance right as a startup SME running in Ghana and across Africa, because it is part of navigating the complexity of business building. And as such, we thought it would be best to bring an event like this, bring industry expertise, bring best practices and practical advice that will enable you as a startup entrepreneur, you as an SME um, founder, or anybody playing the space to know how you can build strong governance systems and frameworks to ensure the best regulatory compliance and mitigate potential risks. It is in this context that we're having this conversation today to enable startups, to enable founders, to enable ecosystem players to know how to build a solid foundation, gain trust from stakeholders, and set ourselves collectively, because I'm also a startup entrepreneur, set ourselves out for success in the long term. So we're very excited about this conversation, and obviously, all my talk is going to be a lot of talk without expert knowledge, because I am not a lawyer. So today we brought the experts. Um, we're going to have this conversation with three people who are high-level experts in their field and have been doing this all the time. Regulatory compliance is their bread and butter. Governance for companies is their bread and butter. And so they are going to give us their expert advice and best practices around these conversations. Today we have us Mr. Richard Nunakpapu, who's the managing partner for Centenary Attorneys, one of the leading startup um, firms in Ghana, legal focused startup firms in Ghana. So we also have Precious Kwate Papafield, who's a legal counsel, Intercontinental Capital Partners Limited. And we have Funmi Yayi, partner at Templars Ghana, also joining us. So three of our experts, very well versed in the conversation of today, are joining us today to have this conversation. If we are ready, happy to start the ball rolling. I hope everyone is doing well. Richard is my good friend. Richard, how are you doing today? Okay. Precious, how are you? Are you calling from Accra?
Yes, Isaac, I'm good, thank you. I'm in Accra.
Excellent. And I believe Fumi, you're joining us from Lagos.
No, I'm in Accra.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Texas,
Oh,
Ghana. So I'm in Accra.
yes, yes, yes. Okay, sure. I mean, we're in a global world, so I'm just making sure. Okay, so we're going to just kickstart the conversation. I have said the background. Running startups are very difficult, and part of the complexity is making sure that you are regularly you are regularly in touch with what regulators and compliance frameworks are in your jurisdiction or ecosystem, so you can play in them, so you can avoid the pitfalls. So today's conversation is around that. How do we make sure that We have awareness of the governance and compliance requirements. How do you avoid the pitfalls? And I'm going to be starting the conversation. Richard, are you with me now? Okay. It seems Richard is having some problems, so we're just going to start off with, let's start off with Fumi. So Fumi, you are a highly regarded resolution expert, based in commercial and transactional deals. But also you really understand what is happening in the startup ecosystem. Can you tell us, in your expert experience regarding startups and fintechs in general, can you share some insights on some of the key compliance challenges that companies, founders face on the daily, and how they can be uniquely addressed in those ecosystems, startup ecosystems, fintech particularly, if you can share your experience.
Hi, thank you, Isaac, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So the experience that I would want to share on, because I mean, there are so many aspects to startups and SMEs and the challenges they face, even on the, on the compliance and regulatory, from a compliance and regulatory perspective. But then I want to share from an intellectual property angle, right? So, for most, so startups that have IP assets, that have created things and their whole business is around what they've created. That's those are the people that hopefully would be able to benefit from this insight that I'm sharing. Because you find the thing with startups, SMEs, and maybe even businesses generally is that there's a common trend, which is everybody just wants to get the deal done, right? At the end of the day, you just want the transaction. And almost the lawyer is kind of like in the way, when a lawyer starts coming and telling you about registering companies, just like, you almost think that in doing all these registrations, you may even discourage your partner. So you don't even want to get into that. But then the truth is, these conversations and the things that we're discussing today are the things that one must do first. If you're not doing it first, you're doing it alongside with the other things you consider first. Otherwise, you stand a great chance of losing everything that you thought was important. So, these compliance um, points are extremely important. Yes, they may seem like a bit of a distraction at the beginning of business because the main focus is on getting the deal done. Yes, they may cost more money than you intend to spend or even have to spend at the early stage of your business, but they're extremely important. So just think about it this way from an IP perspective, that you give birth to a child. And then I don't think there's any responsible parent that, except of course, yeah, trusting God, that would not go and get the vaccines or the immunizations that are required for a baby because you are just happy you have a child. At least I have a child. No, because your child will get polio or whatever it is, chickenpox, and then so what then what happens to the child? So that's exactly what this is. When you create something, you must be very careful at the beginning to protect that thing you've created. You can look at it as your child. So from that angle, what I want to say for startups or SMEs that have IP assets is register that asset. Register your assets, whether it is a patent, if you have an invention, an innovation, register it. Particularly for those of us who could be in Ghana, right? It's actually a very straightforward process. Go and register it. Register whether it's a patent, whether it's a trademark, whether it's a copyright, register it and know that you own this thing. If you've created an entire business around this idea of yours and you don't own it, then Mr. Jack is going to come up tomorrow and he's going to be running the same thing. And obviously, that defeats the whole purpose of the business that you have put together. So, number one is protect your asset by registering your intellectual property, right? Number two is enter into contracts. So you've registered your intellectual property. Maybe you are a fashion designer, for instance, and you now have a label, you've registered that trademark. and then somebody just comes and says, "Oh, we're having, maybe GT Bank is now doing the fashion show in Accra. Come and bring 20,000." You just say, "Oh yes, I'm coming," because you know that no, you must have a contract, and it's extremely important as well. Sometimes startups, SMEs, you may think that contracting is also a bit of a distraction because you don't want to, once the person has agreed to your price, you just feel that that's enough, how much are you paying me? And then, but no, you the other thing I would say is even in that's your contract, that your business contract, try and always consider what would happen if a dispute arises. Because disputes arise all the time in businesses. They go together. It's like wearing a shirt and it gets dirty. Disputes would arise, and if you don't envisage how you intend to protect yourself or resolve the dispute or even avoid the dispute by way of contracts, when your dispute arises, you are now stuck because most times SMEs, or you don't want to spend your time in court or going to a law, going to engage service of a lawyer because you probably don't even have those funds to waste. So I would say protect your assets, make sure you contract, you document whatever agreement it is that you have, and in that agreement, consider what options you want to explore if a dispute arises, no matter how small the business is, in your opinion. Thank you.
That's very true. I like that you brought a practical scenario of, for example, the fashion person. And I think one thing I saw, in fact, just yesterday, my sister was showing me a TikTok video of two fashion brands. And I believe this is a practice that is happening. My sister is particularly interested in fashion, where I believe a local fashion entrepreneur has gotten hair design stolen by a global fashion brand, and it's some conversation that's going. So that's clear IP that, if I believe was protected, some of these situations can be resolved quite easily. So thank you very much for that opinion on that. So Richard is back. Now, Richard, your firm, you focus on startups and you have deep expertise in the fintech space. Can you tell us how startups can position themselves to be compliant? And in your experience, what are some of the difficulties that they face in meeting regulatory frameworks and compliance issues in our ecosystem?
Thank you, and thank you to our participant. I think that one of the key things that most businesses, not only startups or people in the fintech space, do not particularly pay attention to is the fact that regulation even regulates your idea. So even from the thought process as to what type of business you want to engage in, it must be compliant with a certain law or legal regime. Because the reason why all the four of us here who loves money particularly are not doing, for instance, trading in coke or cocaine is because the law says it's illegal. So from that stage where you are either as an individual or as a group thinking about what next to do, you should be thinking about whether what you are thinking of is permissible or not permissible. However, we've seen that most young people, innovators, first develop the solution before coming to check whether it's a permissible activity or the law will allow them to go to market with it. By which time they would have wasted a lot of resources and time and talent into designing and developing an innovation that will not work. Not because it is not a great idea, but because the law says you cannot, for instance, be at the moment be engaged in that kind of activity. So for me, if we're looking at building capacity to understand compliance, it must start from when we begin to conceive the ideas. From the conception of the ideas, what is also important for young people and innovators is also the type of business vehicle to use to drive those ideas. Depending on whether it's a specialized industry like fintech, where the Bank of Ghana is involved, or a general business that you are running, the type of business vehicle you choose can have an impact on whether you are compliant with the law or not. Not only just the type of business vehicle, even the structure around ownership. Because if you take the fintech, the law regulating fintech, for instance, the structure around ownership is about 70 Ghanaian, 30% foreigner, if you have a foreign interest. So where you do not have this understanding and you are working with other people from either Nigeria, Kenya, US, or South Africa, and then they are significant investors in your business and may more than 30%, it means that when it comes to registering your business entity and applying for license with the Bank of Ghana, you may not be compliant because you've gone ahead to register your business with a foreign interest, which is more than 30%, and the bank says no. If we will license an entity engaged in fintech, it must be 70% Ghanaian, 30% foreign ownership. So the whole chain for compliance needs to be understood by our young innovators in the attempt to building solutions and seeking approvals for those solutions. I understand that largely for innovators, their business is not really about what the law says. It's about what they think technology is capable of doing, particularly once it solves consumer pain points. They are more eager to bring that solution to market, to show up the innovation that we have the solution that can solve this consumer problem. But that notwithstanding, we're never going to have a situation, and we do not have a situation where the law doesn't have a provision for how some of these activities are regulated. We must always be complying with a certain legal regime. So it is important to understand that legal regime from the start, so that we don't go through the mill building up solutions, building up products, having partnerships, having management arrangements and ownership arrangements that do not align with what the requirement of the law is. And then you see young people frustrated now and begin to say, for instance, the regulatory regime doesn't support entrepreneurship, their ideas are not being allowed to be on the market. Yes, those frustrations are legitimate. But the question is, at the time you started building those solutions, were you paying attention to compliance? Were you paying attention to regulation? That is important. Regulation is primary and the bedrock on which everything will be built. And it's not going to change. Yes, we've seen innovation pushing the envelope of innovation. However, the response we've seen from regulators so far shows that regulation is still going to be in place, even where they are more accommodating and welcoming to new innovation. They are not doing so without still having frameworks in place to regulate them. So it is important we begin to get these basic requirements right. And right from the start, when we conceive the idea, we tick some boxes on whether those ideas are legitimate ideas that are permissible, type of vehicle that can be used to drive those ideas, what are the governance structure that those vehicles require. So for instance, the general requirement for directorship of company is a minimum of 2. But when you build a fintech innovation and you're seeking approval from Bank of Ghana, the requirement is 3. So if you don't have that understanding and you generally go and you register a company, even when you are in compliance with the ownership structure, you come back and face problem because your number of directors do not meet that requirement. So understanding the general legal regime is so critical and so important. And some of the frustrations we've had or have experienced from fintech is because they didn't take the first right step by ensuring that they understand how these things must be accommodated in their innovations they are pursuing.
Excellent insights from Richard. Obviously showcasing that he's the knowledge base itself when it comes to these issues. Thank you very much. So we would take thoughts from Precious. Precious is legal counsel at Intercontinental Capital Partners Limited. So Precious, your experience encompasses legal compliance programs, formulating and assessing company policies. You also dealt very much into that space. So from your perspective, how can startups proactively identify and address potential legal risks to establish a solid foundation for governance and compliance as they begin to think about operations and scale?
Thank you very much, everyone. So in my experience, I've actually worked with both investors and then startups. So I tend to have the understanding of what investors are looking for when they are going to invest in startups. And then I've also seen some of the things that startups do that tend to make them not qualified for investment. Now, as Richard and Fumi have rightly hammered on, these are basic things that you need to do. Even if you're not looking for investment, even if you're not trying to scale up as a startup, right from day one, there are things that you need to do. What I notice is that in our market in Ghana, because the startup is set up to make money, generate revenue, they tend to, push the basics aside instead of prioritizing them. So for companies that are trying that desire to raise generate revenue or get investors interested in them, there are four things that I would say should be done right from day one, or as Fumi said, side by side as you are running operations from the beginning. So it's to prioritize the basics and then to invest in quality talent, to have robust policies and procedures, and then to have strong internal control systems. I'll just go into each one very briefly. So to regarding prioritizing the basics, like Richard mentioned, the minimum requirements for a board is two directors for companies, for private limited companies, right? Now, of course, most startups fall within that sphere. When investors come to you, they are going to look at your board, the effectiveness of your board, because that's corporate governance. Corporate governance is essentially how you run, how you lead the company. And without a strong corporate governance structure or tone, investors tend to look at you like, we are not sure you're very serious about what you are doing. It's like just looking at a regular human being and how they live their lives, how they lead themselves. When people are making wrong decisions for themselves, they don't have good leadership skills, you may not necessarily want to associate with them. So that's what investors are looking for when they're coming to you. They're checking, do you have a strong governance structure? Do you have a strong and effective board? Now, what makes a strong and effective board? You need a balance of competencies. Typically companies will just when they're starting, they'll just assign one family member and one friend as a director. But if you are looking to scale up sometime in the future, you actually need to scout for board members who are competent, who are experienced in what you're trying to do. You don't set up a fintech, a mobile app startup and go and bring, I'm not throwing shade on any professional on anyone, but then go and bring someone who lacks any tech experience, say maybe a fisherman to be your director. Unless, of course, you're making the fisherman your independent director who is going to look at things from an independent point of view to say, okay, what's going on here? What's going on there? My point is, you can't have two fishermen as your board when you are trying to develop a mobile app. So it's those things. You actually take your time to find the competent people, and then you also always have to have an independent person on board. And because investors look at these things, because guess what? If both your directors are executives and there's no independent person, the question is what's the control like? Is the board actually going to have the critical oversight of the company's functions and say what needs to be said and direct people in the way that they need to go? And then also you need to make sure that you're evaluating the board performance. What I've noticed also in my experience is that a number of companies do not really undertake board evaluation, and that is why they don't even have the correct people on the board. But a serious investor will just ask you for your board profile and ask questions as to how you're evaluating their competencies, and you don't want to fall short and lose the money that you could gain. Some other basic things to ensure you have are your financials, because these things affect the commercials. When an investor comes, for compliance and corporate governance, there are some aspects of them that do not affect your commercials. So investors will not really run away from you because of your non-compliance with those things. But they would look at the ones that affect your commercials first, and then later they would also look at the things that do not affect your commercials. But if like you have a series of non-compliance in those areas, it casts a certain kind of impression, as in, okay, you don't seem to be generally compliant, you don't have a tone of compliance. We are coming to put our money here, we don't know if the money will survive, so we don't know if we are going to gain the profits that we wish to gain. So those are the things that investors look at. So when I talk about the ones that affect your commercials, like your financials too, you want to make sure that your audit reports are not consistently qualified or adverse. If you're from day one, just make sure everything is in order. If an investor comes 8 years into your business or 10 years into your business, and then they realize in their due diligence that the last 6 years, your financials, your audit reports revealed adverse financial statements, that's going to be a huge question mark. So these are things you need to have in your mind from day one and as you're running the business. Other things include the license and permits. If you are heavily regulated, if you need a license to do what you're doing, don't wait for your license to expire before you try to renew it. Always ensure that you have your active license, because investors are looking at those things too. Then one other thing that I know investors look at is a clear strategic plan. When from day one, investors are asking, what's your plan for the next 10 years? If you do not have a map for the next 10 years, what are you going to use their money for? They need to know that you are serious about what you're doing. Yes, we can see that your business is viable, it's generating profits, but why don't you have a direction for the next 10 years? So these are very basic things that you need to have in place to make you look attractive to an investor. Then the second one was investing in quality talent. When usually, so startups, what I mentioned how they tend to just get anyone to be a director or a company secretary and whatnot. But it's very, very important to invest in quality talent. And when I say quality talent, because we are talking about corporate governance and compliance, I'm referring to a good either legal counsel or a compliance officer or a company secretary. These people are worth their weight in gold, because right from day one, they can tell you what not to do and what to do. For example, if you have Richard and Fumi or Young Sasniri and Templars on as your legal counsel from day one, or as a company secretary from day one, they can tell you, they can guide you as to what to do and what not to do, so that it saves you money 10 years down the line. It saves you falling into trouble with regulators 10 years down the line. Now, because we know that startups generally do not have a lot of money and are trying to, the point is that they are trying to raise money. You don't need to spend so much to get a good legal counsel or a compliance person. You can actually, it can be fractional. You can identify a very good, either, well, not a firm, a very good individual who knows what they are about, and pay for a bit of their time just for them to ensure that you are doing well and you're on track right from the beginning. I've noticed that often startups have their finance people doubling as their compliance people. I've experienced certain startups who are doing well because of that, and then there are those who aren't doing great. The reason being, it's not, finance people are not always experienced with legal matters and compliance matters. Sometimes some people tend to think they understand it. But if you are not experienced, if you haven't done this for several years, you may not know certain steps to take or certain things to put in place, and you still end up putting the company in a place that it shouldn't be. I have personally seen it in my consulting, where I pick up documents and then I realized that the finance person was handling compliance and there were things that were not done. And like Richard mentioned earlier about um, having 3 directors minimum rather than 2 based on where you are. So sometimes some of these things happen, and then you have to pay so much money for an actual legal professional to come in, fix it or rectify it. So right from day one, you should be ready to invest in quality talent. Don't Don't try to cut costs so much that you don't do it, because it will cost you in the future. You end up paying probably even twice, because you might have to pay huge fines or penalties, and then you now have to pay to rectify the situation. And sometimes it just even delays a process with an investor, and they might lose interest because they think you are not serious about what you are doing. Also, yeah, having strong internal controls. So once, it's not enough to have your license or your permits or to comply with the regulations in one specific year. It has to be continuous and consistent. Investors need to see that you've been doing this, that it's your culture, it's the tone. Because guess what? If you are compliant in 1 year, then for 2 years you're not compliant, then the third year you're compliant, then the fourth year. Even as human beings, we can't deal with inconsistent people. You see, so investors are also looking for the consistency. Now, one very simple hack when it comes to ensuring this consistency is to make sure that you know that you have a license, you obtain the license today. It's expiring next year on 6th March. You don't just put the license down or be happy that you've obtained the license. It's, you put it in your calendar system. That's a very simple hack. Note down the day it's expiring and set a 2 or 3 month reminder for you to start processing the renewal, because you need to engage with certain stakeholders to make sure that the necessary money is paid, the necessary approvals are granted, the necessary forms are completed, whatnot, and then you submit it. That's a very simple thing you can do to ensure that you are consistently being compliant with the relevant regulatory requirements for your company. Then you can also maintain a register of your obligations. So if you have contracts as a startup, you can have a register where you note down all the obligations that you are required to perform under those contracts, and track it. We are in a tech era now, so there are so many free tools you can use if you can't afford to spend a lot on tech software to help you do this. You can do it in an Excel sheet with, make sure that you're tracking it. So if you've invested in a good legal counsel or compliance officer in the first place, they would actually be doing this for you. So this is not going to be something that owners of a startup have to stress their heads with, because you'd have already brought on board the right person to ensure that these things are being done. And then lastly, you also need policies and procedures, very solid policies and procedures. And these include generally, policies and procedures in your HR, in your operations, and whatnot. Because I think Fumi mentioned earlier, because these things tend to take time, startups don't focus on them. But it's in your best interest to focus on them and invest in the right people who will make sure that they are done. And as I said, you do not need to spend so much to get the right people to do it. You can get part-time compliance persons, you can get consultants to do these things for you, and you don't need to do them all like right from day one. You can be doing it in bits as you move along, your first year, your second year, and your third year. By the time you realize you have these things in place, then it becomes an issue of maintenance and monitoring. Yeah, I think that would be it for me.
Thank you very much for that very expansive answer. I like how you focus on the investor bit, because then now startups know how to build investor confidence, because that is part of the operations. Fundraising is very core. You need to make sure that you are ready to fundraise, and you need to be compliant in anticipation of fundraising. What I'm interested in finding out from you, Richard, is, she mentioned a bit of culture in there, which is that you have to have a culture of compliance. What does really cultivating such a culture is? Because I know that most people in startups will not be legal people necessarily, and you may need to consult outside legal counsel. How do you balance the tandem between consulting outside legal counsel, but also training your in-house staff to be knowledgeable enough to co-work together, or if there is not such a relationship, to build an internal mechanism that makes sure that you are preparing for such compliance and you'll be ready when it comes?
For me, it starts from the acceptance that compliance is cost. It costs money to be compliant. And when we say it costs money, it's not only physical money. Sometimes we can quantify it as value. And being a startup, that also needs money to grow. There are a growing list of young lawyers who are now understanding the practice where not only are they looking to be paid fiscal cash, but looking to take some equity in the businesses that they support for the services that they deliver. So where there is that understanding that compliance is cost, nobody's going to provide it for free. It must be paid for either in cash now or in value for the future. Then you are able to then get the right support from the start from legal officers, from company firms and legal practitioners. Now, when you get that kind of support, there are a few things you need to do to internalize the support. Don't forget, the lawyer is not going to be sitting in your office on a daily basis to work with you. However, what you can do to derive the best advantage from the services you have is to get a lawyer involved in understanding the business you do. So working closely with the lawyer is very important in understanding your stages of your operation and then helping you build your own internal protocols. What is workable for company A may not be workable for company B. So that's where customization comes in. And that is very important for building protocols, for building dashboard, compliance registers, and stuff like Precious spoke about. That can be internalized. And then there are responsibilities assigned to persons internally to be champions of some of these initiatives that the lawyer may help you put in place. Now, when that is done, it shouldn't stop there. Sometimes what I have observed personally from legal services and how entrepreneurs consider lawyers is that they go to lawyers when there is a problem. They don't go to lawyers when, or they don't see the value of lawyers when the discussion starts happening. So they are excited at the moment there's a conversation about commercials. They even forget at that stage that there is a service called legal services. And only remember when they have demand notice from another lawyer or there's a problem that needs to be resolved. There are demands on them to pay a certain amount, or there is a demand on them that certain bridges have occasioned. We can change that. And the only way you build a sustainable business model that is compliance is when you work closely with your lawyer. So your lawyer should be sitting in the conversations that you are having with your investors. Your lawyer should be sitting in the conversation that you are having with your suppliers. Don't forget, lawyers have confidentiality in the service we provide. So there should not be any hesitation that I don't want my lawyer to know about this. We are doctors. If I don't know what is happening to you, I will not be able to prescribe the right medicine you need. And if you're always rushed to the theater for me to operate on you in an emergency situation, yes, I may save you sometimes. Sometimes you may lose your life because the emergency condition may be more than you require to survive. So it's important to build a very close relationship working with lawyers. Rope them in all conversation. Don't hide anything from your lawyer. You should be as open and transparent as possible. Lawyers understanding those requirements then will be able to help you recommend certain actions that can be taken internally, either by establishing a certain procedure or by putting in place a certain human resource that will be able to help you navigate or avoid some of the complexities that would have arisen. So for me, it's about understanding some of these things and getting it right. That largely, even if you get it for free, it's not going to be forever. Nobody is going to offer legal services for free forever. Yes, so it's cost. It must be paid for. Trade in some of your equities you have as a founder, as an innovator. Get the right support. It's the same thing you can do with accountants, you can do with auditors, you can do with lawyers, you can do with HR consultants. So by the time you realize you've built a team of experts that are providing the right support you need for a business to grow, not necessarily paying for those services, but trading in the equity that you have as a founder. And for me, the motivation is even higher when it's an equity conversation, because if you don't succeed, I don't get money. So I will also make sure, the accountant will make sure, the HR person will make sure, the tax consultant will make sure that we are working together to ensure that you are a thriving business, you are compliant with all the regulation, you are building a sustainable business model, so that tomorrow, if I have even 1% or 0% shares in your company for the services I offer, the value will become 100 million cedis or $1 million or $2 million in the future, because we've done the right thing and we are now going to derive value from it. But if you don't see it as that, and the ownership mentality we have locally, which is that it is my business, I want to own it 100%, then you will not get money to invest in the business. You will not get money to get the right services that you need as support to be able to grow. So we should begin to look at it from that angle, understand that it's critical, it costs money, but there are ways by which emerging firms and emerging practitioners are accommodating some of these emerging talent and the businesses they are doing, and supporting them to grow and become sustainable. That for me, I think should be the right approach to dealing with that. And then you internalize whatever recommendations that the lawyer have, and you can have reviews. If it's quarterly, if it's monthly, you can have meetings in person, online, whatever format you want to adopt, and then but be very transparent and open right from the start with your lawyer, so that at least he or she can be looking at what you should be doing. And largely, you see, sometimes when I've had the opportunity to tell clients at client meetings most of the time, that the conversations we have at those meetings, they see it at today's conversation, but the lawyer will be seeing into the future, because the lawyer's role is to provide for not only today but also tomorrow when there are problems. Fumi earlier said that there will be challenges. Dispute is part of the business. A lawyer's role is not only to provide for what you are agreeing on today, is to look into the future and say, when these things happen, what should be the right way to maintain the relationship, to keep the business going, to ensure that minimal cost is spent on resolving the issue. So if you don't rope in the lawyer at an early stage for him to or she to be able to assist you with some of these things and put in place mechanisms and provisions that help you resolve some of these things, you always have problems, and then it costs you more money to resolve them than you should have been spending in resolving some of those problems.
Thank you very much. This conversation is very insightful, and I hope that the entrepreneurs and founders here are taking note. If you just join us, this is In the Box Knowledge Series on LinkedIn, where we talk about startups, talk about founding, talk about businesses, and how to gain expert and practical knowledge. And today we're focused on legal compliance and regulatory frameworks, and we have our experts here joining us to make that possible. Fumi, we earlier touched on innovation assets, IP compliance, and how to do that and make sure that you are competitive. I am interested in if your product goes to scale beyond Ghana, for example, how does these provisions, intellectual property, also protect you? And how do we think about scalability when it comes to IP and making sure that our lawyers can help us as we grow our business to, first of all, become competitive against people that may be trying to do something similar, because the world is a global village right now. And secondly, how do we make sure that we were able to mitigate such challenges in a global competitive market?
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. Just, before I go into that, Richard made some brilliant points, especially on the point of accessing legal advice, because you had spoken about the fact that we've all spoken actually about the fact that for startups, spending money on lawyers is not priority, right? And he's talked about some innovative ways of pricing, which, one should really consider. The other thing I was going to say, in addition to what Richard said, is the fact that for startups, especially when you haven't accessed any form of, investor funds or stuff like that, you should take advantage of hubs like this and hubs that banks run, because those places actually get you access to legal advice, maybe for free or heavily discounted. But the last thing you want to do, like three of us have said, is stand alone with your brilliant idea, and just you and the world and your great idea. If you're not able to pay, get on a hub, join some form of association that would help you access lawyers. But the point is, you must start from day one with your lawyers. We've all said that. Now, when you have grown to a level where you have actually succeeded in your first jurisdiction and you then want to go out, right, of your original home country, so to speak. IP rights become a big thing, because if we talk about trademarks, for instance, the very interesting thing about trademarks is, while I'm just trying to pick up an item around me, while someone can register a mark, right? Maybe leaf, let's just say, which is probably not going to be possible because of that name in one country, you may not be able to register it somewhere else. And then you want to expand or take your products to another country, but that mark is maybe already registered there, or that name has a connotation in that other country that would make it difficult or impossible, not even difficult, for you to trade using that name in that other country. So, what did Richard say? The lawyers think about your future, not just day one. Okay? So, when you come up with your brilliant idea and you're starting in Ghana, if you're working with lawyers, they already tell you some things like, look, you know what, quickly register this name in all these other countries. Like, you haven't even thought of going there. You don't even have the money yet to go there. But if you've got a little bit of funds, you have some, just register this name because, oh, it's a great name, it's catchy. Before somebody else starts using it somewhere else, go and register it before you even ever get there. So that's what your lawyer does for you. He takes you into 5 years while you're still in year one, but they take you to the future and bring you back. So you've registered that name. So by the time you have that catchy name, it's, you've saturated the Ghana market. When you get into Nigeria, everybody already knows the brand and nobody is stopping you from using it because you've already registered the name. Because what you don't want to do is get into another market and spend time, trying to, maybe you go and you want to register a trademark, for instance, you find out that that name is already in use, right? And then you spend time either trying to locate that person, buy the brand or buy the name, or even end up in court. I mean, all those things happen. And other times you're even faced with a situation where you can't even use names. So I'll just say, think about the future and where possible, funds allowing, register that name, especially when you know you're onto something really, really good. It's not, just take that investment and go and register it in jurisdictions that your vision is to go into. That's one, right? So when you have that name, you already have that asset. The other thing that you want to do is, for businesses, even when you have one IP asset, you find out that in the course of operating that asset, you're actually developing more assets, right? There are things you're adding onto your original stuff. So let's say we talked about fashion. So you have a fashion brand, and then you then go into maybe interior decorating, or you go into um, photography, something else that is related. But the point is, as you continue to expand your service, you should have a system in house, that some form of policy that will allow you identify new IP assets as you create them, so that you are not just, you're creating things to be able to sell what you think is an original brand, but you don't realize that that thing you've created itself is something you should protect. You need to have a system in place within your company, within your organization, that allows you identify those things and quickly register them. Quickly register them. If it's a trademark, just quickly register them so that you own the stuff. Because what you're doing by this IP rights registrations, whether it's a patent, a trademark, a copyright, what you're doing really is protecting your brand. Precious had spoken about that. And then it makes you more attractive to investors because they see you as a serious person. Like, oh, we when you are speaking to an investor and I say, oh, what innovative way do you have, or are you implementing, delivering your business? And you say, oh, we just decided to start putting our lines out in this way, whatever it is. And then the investor says, oh, that's really brilliant. And you say, oh, yes, and we have registered it. You show that you're a serious person. And like, oh, this person understands, what they're doing. So identify those things, register them, register even into the future. And then when you go into new territories, you start again like you started from day one. register a company. Don't take your brand to a new territory, a new jurisdiction, and just say, oh, we've started selling in Nairobi, we've opened the shop. Have you registered your company? No. I mean, because, you know, the thing is, when regulators come after you, they don't even, many times, they have no compassion and they can crush you. So just be compliant from day one. You're entering into a new town. Yes, it's a great brand, but it's not about just the beauty of your shop. I'm sticking to a particular business idea. Like, you must, that there is a business you're registering, and then there is a brand that you're protecting. And wherever you go to carry those two things, register your business. You know, no matter how cumbersome market entry is, if it's too difficult, then don't go in there. Don't bother. Go into the other place where you can. So if, for instance, they don't let foreigners do garments work, or then you just go somewhere else, because you must always make sure that at every point in time, wherever it is you're operating, you have all the right governance um, protection. So register your business when you enter a new place, protect your brand when you enter a new place, ensure that as your business grows, you should make sure you continue to identify those special things, unique um, products that you're creating in your business, and register them as well. That's how the world of IP works. Just keep registering them as well. You know, when you think about Coca-Cola, what else is there to it? You know, people have done all sorts of fizzy drinks and sodas, but it's not Coca-Cola. You understand? So everyone should just always bear that in mind. You know, register. If you think you've come up to something new again, keep registering and create a system that allows you to identify them as they come up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for me. Um, so for everyone whose business is thriving enough to start scale, these are very insightful ideas on how to make sure that you're protecting the image and brand of your company. Legal tech is becoming a big thing, and part of the promise of that is that we can reduce cost, time, etc. Now, I know that Precious, you sit on the side of both investors and startups. What are your thoughts on startups utilizing such technologies in mitigating either cost, time, or bringing that as a way of meeting compliance issues in our world of technology and AI now?
I'm
Precious,
always,
please.
I'm always, I mean, I would always support tech being used, because it really makes things easier. If there are there are legal managing softwares that you can use. There are, I cannot remember them off the top of my head, but a very simple search online would show you which ones to use. So that sometimes you can use free versions of them, or yeah, generally free versions of them as a startup. But again, I think what we all keep hammering on is the fact that you just invest. It won't be a useless investment for you, because you essentially you get an output based on what you put in. So if you want to use, let's say, a particular um, software or product to manage your contracts, or to manage your compliance, your ongoing compliance requirements, and you do not get the actual full version of it, and you want to cut down costs so much, and then so you get, let's say, a free version, there are certain things that would not be available to you based on the version you're using. But then if you can get a full complement of it, why not do it? It might seem like you are spending a lot, but in the end, it actually sets you out. It makes you stand out. It's like, I'm going to use a very interesting analogy, but it's like you're putting yourself out on the market as a lady. Based on how you present yourself, you might look very attractive to your suitors or not. The kind of investor you're looking for example, you have a business and you're looking for $500 million, not $1,000. You don't go into a pitching session when you are using free stuff in your company. You need to literally prepare yourself for the kind of investor you are looking for. So just so if you know what kind of investor you're looking for, maybe you just need $1,000 for your business. You can use free versions of technology and software and things like that, and you get by. But if you're looking for a certain quality of investor, then you also need to invest that on a very what you call it, even level, to get them to again see that you are serious and that you will do what you need to do to get what needs to get the relevant output that you're looking for.
Still here with us in the box knowledge series on LinkedIn. We're running up the conversation and taking final submissions from our expert panel. If you have any question, you can put it in your chat box or wherever you are viewing us from. Finally, I think, Richard, in the beginning of the conversation, we talked about that dalliance between innovation and regulation. And we've spoken at length at this. If you would say last words to somebody in the tech space where you play in, to an SME, someone with an innovative idea, creative industry, etc., about how they should manage themselves in anticipation of an innovation gray area. And I'm talking about gray area, for example. The law hasn't really said anything about it, hasn't said it's legal or not. How do should they think about this? And how should they generally approach innovation-led compliance so that in the future they don't get into the problems that we've talked about?
For me, innovation has enabled a lot of possibilities. And that is why today we are discussing issues of gray areas. There's no certainty and predictability of what we can use technology to do today. So generally, we're going to have situations where the new solutions we develop will not have an existing legal framework for. But in as much as that will be the norm and we will experience some of these innovations frequently, the innovators must also begin to work to some of the concerns that regulators and consumers are having about the use of technology. Issues of privacy, issues of data protection, issues of biases, issues of whether they are safe with the kind of solutions that they are developing. So that where even you develop a solution which is unapproved, which is not having a regulatory framework at the moment to support it, people will still see the usefulness of those technologies and begin to make calls for regulatory reviews to accommodate them. But where we develop solutions purely from commercial point of view, that the interest for the innovator is just to make money and not to care about the consumer who is going to use the solution, then we're going to see some of those concerns being at the fourth end of whether we should allow it to be in the market or we should restrict them. So consumer concerns and insights are very critical ways of addressing some of these new ways of use of technology, so that innovators who begin to be responsible and develop solutions that accommodate some of these concerns now will begin to have favor with some of the regulators going forward. And I've also begun to see some of the regulators also responding by providing regulatory gap mechanisms. So for instance, if you take the fintech space, we have the regulatory sandbox that is being established at the Bank of Ghana for innovations that do not fall within any of the license categories to be submitted for piloting and approval under the supervision of the regulator. Those initiatives will come. But ultimately, we all have the responsibility as innovators and ecosystem service providers to ensure that whatever we are working on is in the best interest of the consumer. It's not intended to take advantage of any gap that has been created by technology. It's being done responsibly, it's being done ethically, and then we are promoting true value ultimately for the whole ecosystem. And then we will begin to see people working even in our favor and driving conversations for how some of these things should be adopted and done immediately. That's the only way we can win the advocacy for new innovations going forward. But if they fail to meet these standards, then everybody will begin to see them as not useful tools to be pursued. And then we'll lose the support we currently have for the ecosystem.
Okay, Precious, your final words on this conversation before I go to Funmi.
Sorry, say that again.
Your final thoughts on this conversation before I go to Funmi for our last words.
Again, we are not saying what we are saying. I think we're saying similar things, and it sounds like we might be belaboring the point. And we are not doing it because we are lawyers and that we want business. And of course, as lawyers want business and money, but it's because we've done this for quite a while, and we understand how businesses tend to suffer years along the line. And so all we are trying to say is that protect yourself from the beginning. For me, I always liken compliance and governance to marriage, also because of the fact that companies are looking for investors. It's just like trying to get married, because when you're getting married, you're looking for someone to invest in you. Whether you're a man or a woman, a woman is usually looking for a man to invest in her financially, to build a house for her, to keep her safe for several years of her life. The man, on the other hand, is also looking for that kind of an investment, either emotionally, physically, have someone helping you. And even sometimes, women are investing their uterus or their wombs. That's a very serious investment as well. Now, for you to decide to invest such a thing in another person, you need to do your due diligence. You need to make sure you are protecting yourself, that you're not going to go into it and then regret. Even though, unfortunately, people tend to go into it and regret, because that's probably the way life is. As a business, you need to protect yourself from the beginning. Yes, you get it that you want money, you want happiness, but try to protect yourself proactively from the beginning. And how you do that is to get the right persons on board right from day one. Just make sure, spend the time, spend the money, do your research, invest in the right personnel, whether a lawyer, a compliance officer. I think Richard mentioned much earlier that you do not need to, there are young and upcoming lawyers who are very much interested in, especially the tech startups, and might want some form of equity in the business. So you may not necessarily need to pay them as much as someone who's been a legal counsel for 20 years is expecting you to pay. So it's just you don't need to we are not asking you to cut your head off to protect your business from further harm down the line. We're saying look for practical ways. And like Fumi mentioned, you join hubs like this, you join other hubs, there's so many different avenues that you can gain the kind of guidance and advice that you're looking for right from the beginning if you are not doing well. So just really try to not be too cheap about things and invest, and then you'd get very good results.
Okay, try to not be too super about things. Funmi, please, your last words.
So yeah, we've all stressed the need for legal counsel. I think on that point, what I will add to that is, even as you grow, right, your one lawyer that you had at the beginning, the Richard who you've given equity in your business to support you, that same one lawyer can take you to wherever you want to go to. You want to start trading in Sudan, you don't need to now, I need to look for a lawyer in Sudan. No, that same one lawyer is able to support you wherever it is you're going to. If you need somebody contact in Sudan, he as a lawyer or she as a lawyer will be able to get you, is the best person to even access Sudanese legal advice for you than you as a business person. So just stick to that one legal partner. So we talk about the importance of legal support from a regulatory and compliance perspective, but then another point, and it's being stressed, is even from an operational perspective. When you start that transaction, not just give me my licenses, oh thank you, you've done well. Even when you're negotiating that contract, it may sound too much, but honestly, keep your lawyer close. I personally, sitting down in all my years of experience, I haven't seen, no, not startups now, but really big business people who don't have their lawyers close. Keep your lawyer close. If you're a small business, you don't need a big lawyer. Also keep a small lawyer, but keep your lawyer close. Keep your lawyer close even when you're discussing your transaction, not just compliance issues. Then do your market research. We just stress that your market research for where you are, your market research for where you want to go to. Don't think that every country is the same, right? So this is where we're talking about scaling up now. If you've succeeded in country A and want to go to B, just act like you're starting again so you don't make mistakes that will take you back, right? Do your market research really, really well. Understand that your product, though useful in country A, will also be accepted in country B. Those type of things, just, I think the rest would be, have been stressed more than enough. But yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Now, there's one question from our audience. Someone says, "Hi, I'm a chartered governance professional based in London. Where does chartered company secretary slash governance professional sit in the process? In this process slash building of the startup governance framework? Any, you know, few seconds of thought on that, and then we can close the conversation."
Yeah,
Person is
I didn't get the
asking.
question, Isaac.
The person is asking that where does chartered company secretary slash governance professional sit in this process of corporate governance? The person is a chartered governance professional in London.
It's a question. It's a
So
question. I don't
where
get it.
does the chartered
Yeah.
company secretary, where does the chartered company secretary
Oh,
or governance professional sit in this process of
okay.
corporate framework?
Okay. Oh, yeah, so a company secretary is a compliance officer essentially because it's your company secretary that will tell you when to do your annual filings. If you don't do the annual filings, the regulatory office will take your name off the books and your company will actually not even exist. So your company secretary really helps you with your regulate the meetings that you must have every year, whether it's board meetings, your annual general meeting, your annual filings. Yes, that the company secretary helps with compliance. So yes, the company secretary for the most part is a very significant compliance officer within the company. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very
Everything that
much. Okay, did you want to say something,
Yes,
Precious?
I was just
Oh,
adding to what Fumi said. As a child, as a chartered company secretary, I think that one essential thing is always to ensure that you are abreast of the specific industry requirements for the company that you are working with or assisting. Because one typical thing that company secretaries do will be writing board minutes. Now, sometimes your regulator is looking out for certain things in your minutes to make sure that you are actually complying with the requirements or that you are not, doing certain illegal things. Sometimes companies may do some unethical things but are not actually illegal. Now, as a company secretary, in preparing minutes, you need to apply discretion and know what should go into the minutes and what should not go into it. I'm not saying do not put in relevant information, but it's a skill. It's something that you need to bring to the board. You can't be a company secretary and become a liability to the board or to the company. So it's very, very important to also immerse yourself into the technical aspects of the industry in which you are working. It's not just a matter of sitting to take minutes or to make file things with the regulatory bodies. You need to be on top of things. You need to understand so that when you go into the boardroom and directors are talking, you can understand what they're saying. And later, bring a certain perspective that they may not have been aware of. That makes you very valuable to the company that you're working with. And yeah.
thank you very much, Precious. Well, viewers, this brings us to the end of today's conversation of In the Box, Knowledge series brought to you by Box Play Ventures, Accra-based startup and SME consultant and venture builder. Today, the conversation was about how to get governance and compliance right as a startup and SME. And I don't believe there are any parts of the conversation we have left because we have thoroughly discussed all the facets of startup compliance and we have gone in depth with our experts who spoke around the length of breadth of the issue. Richard Nunokaku, managing partner, Sustenary Attorneys, Precious Kwati Papafio, legal consultant, Intercontinental Partners Limited, and Fumi Iyayi, partner, Templars Ghana. Thank you very much, expert panelists, for joining us. And until next time, it's been In the Box. My name is Isaac Kojo. I host the Change Africa podcast. And thank you again. Have a nice day. And until next time, this is Boss Play.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Bye
so
bye.
much, Isaac. Thank you.